The United States is often referred to as the melting pot of cultures due to the diverse population living in the country. With a large number of immigrants arriving in the country every year, assimilation has become a topic of great interest in the academic lives of students and their families. The role of schools in the assimilation process of immigrants is particularly important as they are often the first point of contact for immigrant children and their families in the host country. Immigrant children in schools can face a variety of challenges, including language barriers, cultural differences, and difficulties in adjusting to a new environment. With the influx of immigrant children from different backgrounds, it is important for schools to provide support for these children to ensure they have access to education and opportunities to succeed. 13 individuals from different backgrounds were asked about their perspectives on this topic.
Hey, my name is Mina Sampat.
My name is Carolina Erla.
My name is Andre Vu.
I'm Snail Shah.
I'm Gurvias.
My name is Rajitha Dura.
My name is Sahiti.
My name is Prachi Tal.
I'm Mohammed Adkar.
My name is Tiana Prahi.
I'm Lynette Babu-Verghese.
I'm Daria Shafiq.
My name is Darn.
Each interviewee identifies as an immigrant, child of immigrants, or an educator.
I am a bilingual educator at an elementary school in northern suburb of Chicagoland.
I am a freshman at Loyola University and I am a secondary education in English major.
I am a secondary education and history major here at Loyola University, and I'm a freshman.
A child of immigrants. I came when I was about 3.5 years old.
I am a first-generation American. My parents are both immigrants.
I am a freshman at Loyola. I am the child of two immigrants.
I'm an immigrant. Parents.
I'm the child of immigrants. I grew up in India for the first 5 years of my life.
I am an immigrant myself. I came to the United States when I was about 6 years old.
I immigrated to the United States when I was like 3.5 years old.
I'm a freshman at Loyola University, and I'm a child of two Indian immigrants.
I'm a freshman here at Loyola University Chicago, and I am a child of an immigrant.
Though young, immigrant children get the sense that they are different as soon as they walk into the classroom.
So I moved from Poland when I was 6 years old, so that was in 2011. When I was first placed in a class, I did not know a single word of English, and my teacher did not know anything about the Polish language either, or about like the culture, about like anything at all. So when I came into the classroom, like I still remember like all the kids, they were just like staring at me, and it was very awkward to just like be in that position.
I didn't have a lot of resources to connect with my peers, and on top of that, there was a form of bullying that the teachers had never really seen before, which involved racism, and that was mainly because I was one of the very few Asian children in my school.
This is seen in Lionel George's Los Angeles Times article, Children of Immigrants Often Torn Between Two Cultures, Assimilation. As parents continue to bring their families' hopes and expectations to the United States, a complex tension can develop for young new Americans. George writes about the experiences of Michael Ballowing, who immigrated to the United States from the Philippines when he was in 6th grade. He recounts the experiences of giving a speech known as I'm an American. Back then, I didn't see the irony in it. Looking back, I can imagine how people viewed me, this cute little Filipino kid, 4'9", saying I'm an American. I'm sure back then that's what people like to see with new immigrant kids, accent-free, speaking English in complete sentences. Ballowing says he never really thought that he was a good speaker or that the speech was that moving, but I guess, combined with my parents and my background, it really made an impression on the people who were judging me, who were mostly white Americans, he says. I just kept winning contests. It wasn't until Ballowing went to Loyola High, a private school, that the concepts of race and class collided. He said, I just sensed that I was different at that point. The fact that so many immigrants and children of immigrants view themselves as different from their peers is the reason that, along with assimilation, appreciating the cultures and backgrounds people come from is something schools need to emphasize more. Activities such as culture days have helped many immigrants and children of immigrants assimilate.
Middle school, they had like culture days where you could go participate and like talk about your culture. And it was really like open about that. Nobody was very closed about expressing their religion, and we were also given the freedom to express our religion. And if we had a festival, we were given days off of school, no questions asked. So everyone's very open about it, and that was one of the main things that really helped me assimilate into the U.S. culture, which was really helpful because, of course, when you're coming over from a new country, you have a lot of doubts, and if people are open and are really like welcoming with open hands.
I feel that for my schools, lots of student-led organizations throughout my middle school, high school, and collegiate life have really helped in the assimilation of immigrant children, in the sense that they teach us like acceptance, being in touch with our culture, and them just understanding our culture as a whole, because we are able to drive in a crowd that's also diverse, and they can truly get an understanding as to what it's like to be an immigrant child, or what our cultural backgrounds are and everything like that.
In school, honestly, I was part of like a district that was pretty inclusive. Like we had a multicultural fair, which isn't like a huge thing, but like at the time it felt like it really was to have some type of representation. And in that sense, I think my school did a good job of like showing inclusivity and diversity. We like celebrated, like had like a Diwali celebration, like a Holi celebration. Obviously it wasn't like anything too big, but it was there, which was like really nice. High school had a thing called culture shows. So for like, we had a lot of culture clubs and like 4 major culture shows, and like everyone participated in all the different types of dances. You got to choreograph and everything. And I think that really, like, dance in itself really brings people together, and that definitely like made me feel more proud of my culture and passionate, and like it helped me want to share it with other people, because they were willing to do it as well, which definitely helped. But yeah, so things like that are more interactive and have to do with art, like those definitely bring people together, I think, and like having that even like as early on as elementary school can always help.
They'll like observe different holidays and like be accepting of like when students are observing these holidays, or like Ramadan per se, or like for me for like Diwali or Ganpati, if like I need to leave for a celebration.
I would say when it comes to the assimilation and the accommodation of immigrant children and their families into the U.S. culture and its system, I think that my school in general has done a great job, because we've been able to get involved in a ton of different cultural events. You know, they host Garba, they host different like henna night and stuff like that. So in terms of like my experience, my personal experience, I think I've had an overall welcoming experience.
Schools are one of the main sources immigrant families use to learn about the ways of life when they move to a new country, and schools should focus on making sure their students are assimilating well to the new environment.
I have been teaching as a TBE, that is Transitional Bilingual Educator for Hindi language. This area I have seen has grown tremendously with diverse students coming in from all around the world, and students from India have been growing. The population have been growing a lot, and that's where the schools needed a teacher to teach in Hindi or use the language Hindi to teach English for the ESL as an ESL teacher.
Ann Wicks and Ann Kimball Johnson, director of the Education Reform Initiative at the Bush Institute, in their essay, "For Children, the Immigrant Experience Begins in School," write about the fact that assimilation into American culture does not happen purely through osmosis for immigrants, and schools play a key role in this process, much deeper than just teaching English.
The teacher, she placed me next to a girl who was also supposedly Polish, and I had to sit next to her for like the whole rest of the year, I think. And when I was sitting next to her, she was supposed to like help me out and like tell me, like translate to me like what the teacher was saying, like what the assignment is. But what ended up happening was the girl, she didn't really know Polish, like almost like at all. So whenever I would ask her for help, she would be really rude and just like shut me down, or she would just like ignore me and talk to her friends instead, and they would like laugh at me and just do a lot of like nasty stuff like that. So the teacher, she wasn't really like aware of any of this going on, like that there were like these differences in the classroom, and I wish she was more like educated and knew like what was going on and took like a different approach.
I had done preschooling in India, where I learned like my traditional language Hindi and English together. So when coming here, one of the main, I wouldn't say it was like a challenge per se, but the differences in the English that you learn in India, because that's more like British English, because of the influence that the Britishers had there, versus the English that's spoken here. That was one of the main differences that were needed to like assimilate in the culture, and a lot of my teachers did help with that, with like your English classes, or like even just going to school in general, like your vocab just gets like corrected.
When I came here, my parents didn't really speak a lot of English, so my first language I learned was Malayalam. It wasn't until I was in like first grade or kindergarten when I started to learn English, but up until then, like, my parents never spoke English to me. I would say something that was accommodating in school was that they didn't judge me for not being able to speak English. They tried to immerse me in the language as much as possible. Especially because I was young, it's easier to learn a language.
I would say I experienced a lot of different things when I first moved back to the U.S., especially in schools. I was often made fun of by teachers, and it was just difficult for me to learn another language. I would say in terms of actually adjusting from living in another country, the school, like after school tutoring didn't really help me as much as actually like learning how to speak English from like my cousins and my parents. Like they really put in more effort than the after school tutoring.
Because they didn't even offer ESL or ELL programs, that wasn't a problem for me since I was born and raised speaking both English and Malayalam fluently. But it served to be an issue when during parent-teacher conferences my parents needed assistance and they wouldn't be able to speak and I'd have to serve as a translator.
Wicks and Johnson claimed that schools are not doing enough to support immigrant students assimilate. Clearly, it takes more than an ESL teacher for schools to successfully support students recently arrived in the United States, they say. They believe that this work is complex and varies depending on the students and host communities, because each school district has different ways of supporting immigrant students.
I think I've had an overall welcoming experience. I think there are some faculty and teachers that have taken a little bit longer to understand, where I come from, whether it's like things like saying my name or saying it correctly, stuff like that. But I think overall it's just been a good experience. I think that going back to, I remember when I was in elementary school, my school had this like international night, and we were all able to all the cultures were able to come together, and we were able to bring like food from our own culture and dress up. Dress up in cultural attire. So I think that beginning, just starting from elementary school, like I said, it didn't come in first grade. So starting from elementary school, we were able to have this experience of our culture is welcomed here, we're welcomed here.
They were able to offer these classes for immigrants to learn English and better accommodate themselves to the how it is in America versus where they come from. I think that what they could have done better was maybe offer more specialized classes for learning on how American education systems work and how to better assimilate them by teaching them on what the expectations are in the American education system.
The authors mention a school district in Utah which enrolls over 70% of the state's immigrant students. As the number of newcomer students in the district increased, the district refined and expanded the supports provided to help these children and their families succeed.
As far as immigrant families are concerned, I guess school districts can help them feel welcomed and can help them feel involved in the school community. Now, they may not know the ways the American schools are working. So if any school district would come up with the idea of having a family night where all the families are getting together and they share something about their culture, I guess it would spread awareness among the teachers, parents, other families living in the community, students too, so that nobody is making fun of anybody else or nobody is trying to pull anybody down. So I guess if the school districts, administrators, educators make it a point to make those families feel involved, I guess it is very important, and it will definitely change the way the American education system is working.
The authors go on to describe what the district does to support new students and their families. As an example, the district realized that many immigrant students and their families need a better understanding of how to do school in the United States. That led to the creation of the Tumaini Welcome and Transition Center, a 2-week ongoing class designed to help any new student learn skills like how to use the restroom, how to open a locker, how to respond to a fire drill, and how to ride the bus, along with basic English skills. Wicks and Johnson believe that all schools are not accommodating to the assimilation of immigrant children, but this is the example other districts should follow in order to support new students and their families.
It has been a better involvement and better assimilation, but I do think there's still a lot more to do. Where the administrators and educators, there is still a little bit of lack of connection, I believe. Like the administrators can think of, if they see the number of students, oh, these many students are from other parts of the world and this many are from this particular part of the world. So they try to bring in more resources for teaching these students. But I think the educators, the teachers who are in the classroom, who are dealing with these students day in, day out, they need to be educated, they need to have an open mind. Many a times we see a policy has been passed, a rule has been passed in a school district that this should be done. But the teachers who are dealing with these students, who are teaching them every day, they have the struggle. So I guess there should be something to educate, to provide resources, to have the professional development programs for these teachers and educators in all school districts, so that they are aware of how they would deal with the students.
In her New York Times article, Where Education and Assimilation Collide, Ginger Thompson writes about the influx of immigrant students straining many districts' budgets and resources, and put classrooms on the front lines of America's battles over whether and how to assimilate the newcomers and their children. She highlights the main issue. Inside schools, which are required to enroll students regardless of their immigration status and are prohibited from even asking about it, the debate has turned to how to best educate them.
Before my dad got his green card, and before my parents got their green card, I would remember that when my dad was out of work, I would not only be scared about financial issues, but also the immigration status of my parents. And that would fill me with a lot of anxiety that I could not simply express to even my own teachers who were adults.
Thompson also mentions that the situation is paradoxical because the nation that prides itself on being a melting pot has yet to reach agreement on the best way to teach immigrant students. Whereas Wicks and Johnson mentioned programs certain school districts use to support immigrant students and their families, Thompson goes into more detail about the experiences of specific immigrant students, as well as the cultural differences they face. American students come to school with a lot of cultural knowledge that other teachers assume they don't have to explain because their kids get it from growing up in this country, watching television or surfing the internet.
Being a daughter of immigrant parents, it's different because you're kind of considered like a first gen, because I am a first gen, and it's like you kind of have to do it by yourself. Everything is by yourself. Yeah, you can ask your parents what to do, but it's like they also don't know, and at one point you're just like, you might as well figure it out by yourself because you just feel bad asking them because they're going to feel bad for not knowing the answer. So I essentially just started doing everything by myself, and also because I kept moving back and forth in my life.
In her master's thesis, Reconciling Two Cultures, The Experience of Immigrants and First-Generation Americans from Non-Western Countries, Katarina G. Krasowski mentions the general immigrant experience as well as the melting pot theory. Like Thompson, Krasowski includes specific immigrant subjects and their experiences. From the perspective of newcomers, I addressed the validity of the melting pot theory. Has everyone really melted? I also explored how these individuals define American genders as well as their feelings towards American culture. Many interviewees expressed issues of isolation and discrimination. By analyzing the specific life experiences of the 10 subjects in my example, I will discuss how these subjects shed light on the monumental change of moving to a new country.
I would say the one thing that I would change about school would be names. I think people don't really take the time to really speak the different names from different cultures right. I would try to pronounce my name, but if it didn't click with them within like a couple of seconds, whatever name stuck with them was the name I got. And I wish that they took an extra time to really try to learn my name, at least put in some effort.
Although Krasowski does not speak specifically about students assimilating in schools, many of her interviewees spoke about their experiences as immigrant students. When I started school, I knew no word of English. It was very difficult for me to understand what the teachers were saying, and for that I was isolated in school. They would isolate me and put me by myself. Literally, they would put me in the corner by myself. All the other kids that spoke English were teasing, and the assistant teacher always put me on the side. I didn't really interact with the kids at school.
From an educator standpoint, I think that schools should pay bigger attention to immigrant students and students that come from different backgrounds, because obviously it's very hard when you don't have that support, when you don't even know a word in the language and you're expected to learn and understand the material. When you have the mental capacity to do it, you just don't understand the language. And so as an educator, I feel like it's really important to pay attention to immigrant students and students from all different ethnic backgrounds, because giving these students resources can really like change their lives and move them forward into the future, like what happened with me.
When it came to any parts of schools were lacking or anything, I feel like sometimes faculty, staff, like adults would not be that would not comprehend the things that immigrant children are raised in, since they would just treat us all the same, which is not in the sense anything bad. However, being somewhat ignorant of our backgrounds would be something that does not necessarily help an immigrant child really get raised in a community that is new to them or different than what their parents or any of their ancestors have gone through.
Even at home, if parents were able to introduce the fact that, that there are other cultures that you will be meeting and facing and things like that, that the uncomfortable feelings that other children may face if they're children of immigrant parents, that wouldn't be as much of an issue.
I have hope for the future. I just think that there needs to be a change, and I think that change is usually instated through the faculty being better educated about the lives and realities of students who are immigrants or students who are children of immigrants.
I think that growing up, especially when I was younger, I think that I did have trouble assimilating into the schools because of my limited language and experience in English, and also additionally just a new culture, especially in elementary school, because that's when I was just used to being around other people who aren't my culture. Because as a kid, as a young child, a toddler, I didn't really go to school, but as I entered elementary school, it was a really foreign area for me. But I do think that the schools were very accommodating because they offered classes, English classes for people who weren't very proficient in English. I think that was the main concern that I think they did very well in.
Although there are resources in place, schools need to do more to support immigrant students and their families.
Multiple teachers would explicitly encourage us to talk about our family's immigration stories and the challenges that we've faced and overcome throughout them. As a future educator, I want to be able to do the same thing. In my own practice, it's also something that I really hope to emphasize, because it's something that helped me assimilate and helped my other classmates assimilate, and it's something that a lot of people can identify with.
Whereas resources such as ELL and ESL classes and multicultural education have been helpful to students, many immigrant students and children of immigrants emphasize the struggles they faced, such as cultural differences and racism. The educators and administrators of some districts may not be doing their best to make immigrant students and their families feel welcome, as assimilation in a new country includes many factors in addition to learning the language. The first-hand experiences of immigrant students and children of immigrants are important for educators and policymakers to consider in order to better accommodate new students and their families, for students to feel more comfortable in the learning environment and feel that they have the tools they need to succeed.